Imagine living in a place where you're the minority, where you're limited, treated unfairly, where you're living in a place that declares freedom, but you're not actually free. Wouldn't you want to change that? But how could you change that with so many laws standing in the way? Your answer? Civil disobedience. Take Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, for example. They started a whole movement using civil disobedience. I think civil disobedience is an acceptable way to create change, but only to a certain extent. There is that fine line as to what is and isn't acceptable. Change is needed all the time, though, and it has to be made somehow. It can be made peacefully, which is what I meant when I mentioned that fine line before. Now, as you all know, civil disobedience is different for everyone. But is it really all that different? If you look at Martin Luther King Jr., he had thousands of followers. And don't you think all of those thousands of people had similar morals? I realize that no, not everyone agrees on certain things, but I do think that the basic morals are able to be agreed on. During our discussion, we talked about that fine line. That fine line helps me define civil disobedience for myself. As long as no one is getting hurt, I think civil disobedience is just fine. Malcolm X took it to a whole nother level, though. He said by any means necessary, and that's where I draw the line. I definitely think that people should stand up for what they believe in, but not physically hurt anyone while in the process. In the piece Civil Disobedience we read, Henry David Thoreau said, "But to speak practically, and as a citizen, unlike those who call themselves no government men, I ask for, not at once, no government, but at once a better government." He realizes that we can't live without a government, and we realize that too in our discussion. Just because we have a government, though, doesn't mean that we can't change it. Change is the reason for civil disobedience. The reason people use civil disobedience is because they don't agree with something, and they want to change it. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X didn't agree with segregation, so they used civil disobedience to change that. Before they changed it, though, they used civil disobedience as a way to spark that movement, and then they went on to permanently make that change. McCarthyism was a time when civil disobedience was needed. People were being falsely accused and having their lives ruined, so a change was definitely needed there as well. Henry David Thoreau talked about an unjust government, and he promoted civil disobedience to people so they could change the government. All of this change happened in different ways, because civil disobedience can be seen as more than one thing, and that's just one of the reasons why it's so great. For me, though, I'd prefer to do it peacefully. Doing it peacefully not only agrees with my morals, but is also much easier. If you think about it, not a whole lot of people are willing to do anything too drastic for something they don't agree with, like, say, the government. Henry David Thoreau suggested to people that worked in the government to resign. Now, some may think that quitting your job is drastic, which it is, but by resigning, no one was getting hurt, and that goes back to performing civil disobedience peacefully. Martin Luther King Jr. protested peacefully, and look at the difference he made. Malcolm X didn't, and almost no one knew who he was when we talked about him. So you can see the difference of the impact each one of them had and the difference in the methods that they chose. Margaret Chase Smith simply wrote a letter to the Senate stating her complaints. That's how easy civil disobedience can be. It could have been a lot uglier for her too, since she was a senator complaining about the Senate. All of this change that was made, though, was made by not crossing the fine line. The examples I talked about were all from different parts of history, so you can see that change is constantly happening. Civil disobedience is a great way to make change, but it must follow your morals. If you want to make a change, civil disobedience can help you. So stand up for what you believe in and make that change.